Hey everyone, David here, and I've got some exciting news to share. I've decided to write a book, and I've entitled it Psychosocial Hazards Are Real. The book is intended to help clarify the fact that psychological safety cannot be achieved without paying attention to the psychosocial hazards people are being exposed to. Despite how much individuals might be interested in treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, many cultures are so full of psychosocial traps that no psychological health and safety effort can ultimately succeed. But to address psychosocial hazards, you first have to know what they are, and you have to have some idea what to do to address them. Though the book won't be 100% complete until the spring of 2025, I'd like to share a unique opportunity to reserve a copy during the book presale campaign. The campaign will run from September 16th to October 18th, 2024. This will be an opportunity to get one of the first copies of the book, tickets to the book launch event, and other opportunities to learn more about psychosocial hazards. For more information, you can go to my personal LinkedIn or Facebook page, or the LinkedIn, Facebook, or webpage for ID2 Solutions. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Now, back to this episode of the podcast. Is it possible to be psychologically healthy and have a diagnosed mental illness at the same time? The answer is a resounding yes. We'll be discussing what can be done to make the workplace psychologically healthy and safe for someone living with a diagnosed mental illness. Up next on this episode of the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety.
Welcome to this week's Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. Bipolar disorder is a mental health condition characterized by extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows, depression. These mood swings can affect sleep, energy, behavior, and the ability to think clearly. There are three main types of bipolar disorder. Bipolar 1 disorder is characterized by manic episodes lasting at least 7 days, or by manic symptoms that are so severe that immediate hospital care is needed. Depressive episodes occur as well, typically lasting at least 2 weeks. Bipolar 2 disorder, defined by a pattern of depressive and hypomanic episodes, but not the full-blown manic episodes that are typical of bipolar 1 disorder. Cyclothymic disorder, or cyclothymia, periods of hypomanic symptoms and periods of depressive symptoms lasting for 2 years, 1 year in children or adolescents. But the symptoms do not meet the diagnostic requirements for hypomanic episodes or a depressive episode. So people with bipolar disorder can experience intense emotional states, which can include episodes of feeling overly happy and energized, and at other times feeling very sad, hopeless, and sluggish. These episodes can vary in duration and frequency. However, with proper treatment and management, individuals with bipolar disorder can lead fulfilling and productive lives. In fact, bipolar disorder affects approximately 5.7 million adult Americans, or about 2.6% of the population of the United States is 18 years or older. So how can the workplace be psychologically healthy and safe and a space for someone with bipolar disorder? Well, our guest And this episode has recently written a book about this topic and had some thoughts that they want to share with us. So let's get into it. And we'll start with an introduction of my guest by my guest with this question: Who is Jesslyn McCutcheon?
Hi there, and thank you so much for having me a part of your show. I'm truly grateful and I appreciate it. Who is Jesslyn McCutcheon? Jesslyn McCutcheon is just an ordinary person, but first and foremost, she is a daughter of the King. I have been married to my husband. We just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, and we have three children, an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old, all girls. Our dogs are girls. My husband is outnumbered and he is very patient and he is just awesome. Um, Professionally, I am a member of NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, the Northwest Piedmont affiliate, and I am also a member of the AACC, the American Association of Christian Counseling. Um, since being diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, I also actively advocate for living with a serious mental health condition. My ministry is called Fighting Goliath for Mental Illness. And Fighting Goliath for Mental Illness helps and empowers women who live with bipolar disorder to manage their symptoms more effectively through resources, lived experience, and incorporating God's word in order to live a more fulfilling life. Um, I am a certified national helpline specialist through NAMI, and I'm also a board certified mental health coach.
Wow, lots to lots to chat about. Lots to chat about. So um, before we do, one standard question that I ask absolutely everyone who comes on is, what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Psychological health and safety to me means creating an environment, whether at home, work, or in the community, where individuals feel supported, respected, and valued in ways that nurture their mental and emotional well being. It involves proactively minimizing risks to mental health, such as discrimination, stigma, and excessive stress, while fostering practices that promote resilience, open communication, and a sense of belonging. It also means recognizing that psychological well being is just as important as physical safety, and ensuring these symptoms are systems, not symptoms, are in place to provide support, such as access to mental health resources, education about emotional well-being, and policies that encourage a culture of care and respect.
Thank you. Wow. I again, I send these questions to folks before they come on in advance to give them a chance to think about the topic and to think about, again, literally what it means from their view. And uh, people's answers are varied. They're very different. And some people answer from a perspective of, well, this is what I think it is. I'm not really sure. It really doesn't affect me so much, but I guess it should be this way. And I have a feeling that, your view of this is a little bit more personal based on at least the story that I think you're going to share. At least, and also, for our audience, I often meet folks for the first time when we're on the podcast. And I do that intentionally because I really want to be curious. I want to ask the kind of question or have the kind of dialogue that folks would have when they first meet. Because I find it, so uh, my bride and I have been in a committed relationship for 38 years and been married for 37 of them. And I find that after, you're around someone for a while, you think you know more about them than you may actually know. but sometimes you aren't as curious because you go like, I know how she's going to respond to that. I continue to be surprised. And I'm I'm sure she does as well. But so let's let's go back and let's go in the Wayback Machine. And when did you realize even what bipolar disorder was and that you were living with it?
I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder at the age of 26. This was so new to me and also my family. I didn't have any idea what bipolar disorder was. My symptoms started 3 years prior, right after I graduated from college. And I first was diagnosed with MDD, which is major depression disorder. And I was also diagnosed with OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. So, MDD, major depression disorder, is when individuals have loss of interest or loss of pleasure in activities. They have change in their appetite or weight, their sleep patterns are all over the place. They feel agitated or feeling slowed down. There's fatigue. There's feelings of low self worth, guilt, or shortcomings. And I had severe hopelessness. Um, Obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is characterized by repetitive, unwanted, intrusive thoughts, which are obsessions, and irrational, excessive urges to do certain actions, which are the compulsions. So I was first diagnosed with those two things. And my treatment plan, they started to treat me for both of those conditions. After 3 very long years, which consisted of being in and out of hospitals, doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, the severe depression I had was so bad that it required ECT treatments, which are electroconvulsive therapy shock treatments. Um, and I had 12 of those treatments done to help get me out of the severe depression that I was in. This illness, I was glad when I was diagnosed because there was a relief there to know that we finally got an answer to what I was dealing with and what we didn't know. Um, when I was diagnosed at 26, then that opened up the door to be able to treat me effectively for bipolar disorder too, instead of just major depression disorder and OCD. After I've done research on this, and research has said that it normally takes up to 8 years to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But for my condition, I was diagnosed 3 years later. And you had mentioned in the beginning the different types of bipolar disorder. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1, which is considered the most severe kind. Then you had mentioned bipolar 2, the cyclothymia disorder, and then there's also an unspecified specified one as well, where people can have symptoms but it's not really specified yet. um, the main difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 is that with bipolar 1 you do have psychotic episodes, which includes hallucinations and delusions. People with bipolar 2 do not have the psychotic episodes. They still experience the hypomania, which is a milder form, like you mentioned, than the higher manic that we can tend to experience. But that is the main difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So I was diagnosed at 26. And also, from what I've learned, the typical onset of bipolar disorder is by the age of 25, and it can affect men and women the same. There's no difference between men or women with being diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
So so was there something in your life at the time that uh that kind of, you thought it was whatever. You thought it was school, you thought it was your relationship, you thought it was what, because I've heard, and you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, that and I think I'm correct on this, that all of us have periods in our lives when we are anxious. All of us have periods when our lives when we're a little depressed. All of us do. I mean, those are actually natural, normal, psychological states that we can be in. The challenge is when either of those gets to the point where this doesn't seem to be normal. It seems like I'm probably more anxious than I should be, more hyper than I should be, or I've been down for a while, or I'm down for some reason that doesn't seem to make sense. So was there something that was going on in your life that said, this doesn't seem like normal stuff?
Absolutely. There was a trigger, and it was due to a certain relationship I was in. Not only was that a trigger, which was involved some trauma there, um, but there's a genetic component with my illness as well. So, and then you have the brain structure too, and how the frontal lobe processes information differently, with those who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So there was a combination of things. But prior to that, I really didn't experience anything like this. I honestly did not understand why I could not get out of bed any longer. You know, I, it hit me like a freight train. I had no idea what was wrong with me. So
Yeah, and I think that, well, matter of fact, that I'm certain um, that is really important for people to hear because these again, this is life. These things happen to us, and we can be, triggered by things outside of ourselves. Circumstances, and particularly you mentioned relationships because relationships are all kinds of relationships, either personal, professional, romantic, whatever they might be. These relationships that in and of themselves may seem normal to other people, may seem perfectly reasonable to the other person. They just don't work for me. The reason they don't work for me could be all kinds of things. It doesn't really matter but for me, it's not working. And my body, through my emotions, tells me that this isn't right for you. This doesn't work for you. This doesn't. And this is the connection when I talk about psychological health and safety as it relates to the workplace. A workplace is just simply a series of relationships with other people. We all get together to do something. Whatever that thing is, hopefully we do something. Now, there are some places where perhaps we don't do as much as we should, but it's a relationship environment, no different than our faith traditions or our recreation, or it's other human beings that get together to accomplish something. And there's this belief by some that says, whatever goes on at work, it doesn't really affect people. It doesn't have any real effect. And, people they ought to just be able to come and just adapt to what's going on here and it'll be okay. Uh, so, w- but talk a little bit about how your experience, so how your living with bipolar disorder impacted your experience in workplaces, either one or more.
that's a great question, and it's a very important question. The environment in which you work speaks very loudly to someone who lives with bipolar disorder. And a lot of times, I would say my number one trigger would be the amount of stress I was under within a role of a job that I played. I've had to personally leave two of my positions, resign from them due to the amount of stress. It affected my moods. It affected my overall mental health, my overall well being. And I knew that in order for me to get past this, since I've lived with it so long, that this was the next necessary step that I would need to take. Um, Another thing is stigma and disclosure within the workplace. Living with bipolar disorder is a very personal choice if you choose to disclose that. It takes years for people to find that courage to be able to open themselves up to other people maybe they're not very close to disclose that information, and that takes a lot of courage to do that. I personally was not able to do that until 20 years down the road. I lived with the disorder for 20 years before I even disclosed that to anyone that I worked with, because I just didn't feel comfortable. In my mind, I feared that people knowing would not understand. They would not understand the illness and that I would be treated differently. I didn't know how that would be. Um, you know, and I've also experienced when people did find out that I lived with bipolar disorder, there were side conversations that took place. Are there certain you've something switches. You've had these relationships with these people you work with before, and then all of a sudden the relationship just doesn't feel like it was before. Something switches. And in turn, that just makes it even harder for that individual living with the disorder. Um, so, you know, the stress of the job can bring high anxiety. I've had a number of experiences because I did not share and disclose that information, where I was hurrying myself to the women's bathroom to hide myself in a bathroom stall because I was having an anxiety attack, a panic attack that I didn't want to share with anyone, that I didn't want anybody else to see because I didn't think anybody else would understand. And sometimes when you have a panic attack like that, they can last anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes. It's a process. And that's another layer of it. A lot of times people who live with bipolar disorder have a coexisting anxiety condition that goes with the disorder. So creating an environment that is accepting of mental health is huge for people who live with the disorder.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy, www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
The sad thing about it is, again, people form these organizations to do whatever they decide to do. And we all tend to, when we design them such that they really work for us. So it's in a location that works for me. It's doing a thing that I enjoy doing. It's bringing on people that I enjoy being around. But that's really the challenge. So I have a sole proprietorship for a reason. I don't have employees or anything like that, really intentionally. And there are parts of me that think that my thoughts and ideas about how people should be treated may be even too high for me. they may be, because I have this belief that as soon as I bring on another person, it now is not my thing, it is our thing. And it should be it should work for both of us, which means it might take a little longer. But that's, to me, much, much, much more important than whatever it is that we are going to accomplish. It's important that we both feel like we can be ourselves, whatever that means. And disclose or not, this has to be something that works for me. And sadly, we have organizations who don't get the physical stuff either. They have these expectations that people do certain things, and physically I can't really do them, but I'm afraid to bring it up. My background, most of my adult life was spent in the fire rescue service. And there's this idea about how, big and strong and whatever people are supposed to be able to do the job. And that's just not totally accurate. It depends. Some things are great for big people, some for small people, some for tall, some for short people, some for, it just depends on what it is that we're doing. And what, folks don't do the hazard analysis. They don't do the job. What is the job that we're expecting this person to do? They go out and look for people who have those skills, but also realize they may bring some things that don't necessarily fit, but we got to have that too. So this person they may have high blood pressure. They may have diabetes. They may have, a knee that gets sore every now and then. They may have all kinds of things. And they also may have mental challenges on some days that they may not feel at their best. What's the big deal? We hired that person. We brought in that person. So we got the entire package. And the question is, can we have an environment so if Jesslyn is having that day, that she feels safe enough to be able to tell us, I'm not feeling it right now. And that'd be okay. That we all rally around that to say, okay, well, we're not, and we're going to adjust today because that's just what's going on with you. So again, I'm off on a bit of a rabbit trail because I can't help myself. Would that kind of environment have made it different for you?
Yes. Yes. If I did not have that fear is what brought on that anxiety. It brought on that paranoia. Like, they're not going to understand. And what if they don't understand? And what if I get fired now? You know what I mean? It goes to there. Absolutely. The same with, it gives you the openness about talking with somebody about your schedule. Let's say you're having a bad day. Hopefully the organization that hired you trusts you for what they hired you for. And if you need to work at home that day, they can trust you that you're going to get your job done at home too, if that is what that individual needs, Also, to encourage taking your lunches. I used to be so bad at working through lunches, and that was my bad. That was my fault for doing that. I always take my hour lunch now. Go outside, get some sunshine, get away for an hour, and then come back. That taking that break is huge. Take those breaks, when the organization gives you those breaks. In your vacation, take your vacation. All of the self-care things that you need to do, the company needs to help support that as well on their end for their employees, and help encourage that in the environment as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It comes again under the category of, if you're going to bring in human beings have physiological needs. They do. One of those is eating. That a human being cannot go days and days and days without eating. that just won't work. And physiologically, it will not work. It doesn't matter how good they are at their job; they have to eat. And again, I think we forget about Maslow's hierarchy, and we actually a lot of cultures actually support people. They actually give you a pat on the back when you don't take lunch, and talk about how stressful it is, and promote people who think that's a good idea. And that's a part of the problem. It Many social settings that we call work are designed to hurt people. They are. They're set up to hurt. They're set up to make money. They're set up to produce things, but they're also set up to hurt people because perhaps even no one has thought about how can we do this thing but not hurt people. So you end up, it took us, we were a country for, oh boy, nearly 194 years before we decided to have a federal law to protect workers. Seriously. So this is a fairly new concept in, a couple of generations, but again, the organization itself should be set up to be concerned about human beings. So since we're on the conversation about work and mental health, what led you to become a mental health advocate? So you realized that you had some mental health challenges of your own. So, what got you interested in advocating for others?
Definitely my lived experience, definitely what my journey has been like, what my family's journey has been like. And after we have traveled this and tried to navigate this journey as long as we have and will continue to do so, I realized that my journey could possibly help somebody else. That came to be for me in 2020 when I first heard of NAMI. And up to then, I had never heard of NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, right? They have this program called In Our Own Voice. And In Our Own Voice is a program for individuals who live with mental health conditions. And they train them and they teach them to advocate, to tell their story to other people, to share their message to other people. Going through this training empowered me. It empowered me to take that training, that I could do this. It was very hard to take the training and do that for the first time and be that vulnerable. But when I was able to cross over that hump, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. From that time on, I started getting involved with advocacy. I got involved with the walks. We created Fighting Life for Mental Illness has been a part of the NAMI walk for the last 2 years. We will continue to do that every year going forward. I started advocacy training. I served on the NAMI National Helpline for 6 months, which only added to um, it only gave me more purpose for what I wanted, for what I wanted to do to help others. Being able to serve on that helpline and taking those calls from those family members or that individual and having them tell us that we helped them in that moment, or we provided them with that resource that they needed in that moment, and they were not aware of those resources were even available. I knew that I could help in some way with my story. And I knew that going forward, that that's exactly what I wanted to do. So my ministry was created November of 2023. And last year, I just recently, last October, 2023 was a very hard year for my family and I. A lot of things happened. I had a third major neck surgery. My father passed away unexpectedly at the end of July, and the stress was just overwhelming. And I knew again that I was going to have to do what was best for me. But I knew then as well that I wanted to also go into full-time ministry. So that is when I decided to go into full-time ministry. So
Have you found that your at least your view of your condition, do you believe the condition is the same and or it's gotten better, or do you think um it, so has your condition been the same as it has always been and you're dealing with it better, or has the condition gotten better? Which How would you describe it?
it takes many years to find what is going to work for you as a person. Each person is individually different and unique. But yes, where I am today, after allowing myself to become vulnerable enough to step out and join a community who I knew would constantly support me, it helped me with my overall health. And now being in advocacy continues to help me with my overall health. But honestly, your journey with being having bipolar disorder or living with bipolar disorder is up to that individual. Nobody can fix that individual but that individual. I had to learn over many years how to really self-care for myself, what medication was going to work for me. And it has not been, it's been a hard journey. It's been a very hard journey. Bipolar disorder does not have a cure. You know, this is a disorder that people have to learn to manage for the rest of their lives. And life circumstances can just throw a wrench in things. Just like last year with all those things, all those big things that happening in that year, it threw a wrench in things really badly, and it really knocked me off track. But yeah, bipolar disorder is very unique for all of us, but now more than any time ever before, I live a very fulfilling life because I know how to live and manage my illness. But being a part of a community helps me to also stay in recovery. So finding your people, finding the people who support you, for you, and finding your community is a huge piece for people who live with bipolar disorder.
Right, right. So what are some steps that you think an organization can take? And again, in your case, it is how you can create uh, a culture, an environment that would be more supportive of a person with bipolar disorder. But I would rather suspect that if you can address bipolar disorder, you could probably address any other form of mental illness. So, are there some things that the organization can do? And again, I don't know whether disclosure is necessary, but you can please feel free to talk about that as well. But so again, a little bit of just a little bit of help for organizations to say, look, we want to do better, but we don't know where to start. What would you
Absolutely.
suggest to them?
The number one thing is to reduce the stigma, is to take like a first aid mental health training program. Have your leaders, your managers, your employees, or your HR director take that first aid mental health course so she can or he can um, you know, address the organization after take that course, or bring somebody in with lived experience to share what it's like to live with a mental health condition and certain symptoms you can just keep an eye out for, or how to respond if somebody should come to you with a need or a concern. And like you just said, it is a very personal decision whether you disclose this or not, and confidentiality is huge as well, that is also taken into consideration. So if your employee is struggling in that area and they go to you, and it takes that much confidence even to ask to have certain accommodations during that time, to keep that confidential if that employee is not ready to discuss, um, offer comprehensive mental health benefits. A lot of organizations still do not support the mental health end of it, like the physical health, to have the benefits that cover psychiatry, or the appointments, or the medication needed. Implement mental health policies into your handbooks. That this is a part of what this organization believes in, and how they are going to help, support individuals who live with mental health conditions. We mentioned this before, encourage the work-life balance, you know, um, and, regularly assess the situation. You could do an anonymous survey to survey your employees, to see how things are going, and, continuous improvement, and updating those resources as, you take those surveys.
Sure, sure. Yeah, again, and as you're as you're talking about this, I mean, think about how many organizations they will advertise their benefits as one of the recruiting tools. So we have this thing, and who would go? Well, I guess I should take that back. There are some who, for a variety of reasons, will work just because they need the work and aren't concerned about the benefits. But I find that particularly people who have really high skill levels, who are what people would consider top talent, they can be very picky. I'm really good at whatever it is I do, and I can be picky. I can decide where I go, and um, I think that more people are starting to pay attention about uh, relative to mental health related conversations? Is the culture okay to talk about it here? And again, I know there are a lot of people. There are some people. I won't say there are a lot because I don't know what the number is, but I think there are folks who think that this conversation around mental health is soft and that it's not really important and that folks just ought to buck up and deal with it. I believe that population is fairly small and growing smaller, though. I believe, again, from the exchanges I've had, particularly with Gen Zers, I heard the other day that this year Generation Beta is going to be born. That's what I hear. So as Generation Z and Alpha and Beta come into the workplace, they're going to come into the workplace with a different set of expectations. This is the generation, particularly Gen Zers. This is a generation that we made sit in their child seats and we put padding under their jungle gyms and they all got a trophy and all. And again, people laugh about those kind of things, but many of those things happen because their parents didn't enjoy their upbringing. So they tried to make that a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable. But now as these folks come into the workplace, they're going, well, hold up. I was told that bullying was a bad thing and I've been supported. My parents cared about me. And so you're going to have to do the same thing. Otherwise, I'm not working here. And that's just the way it is. And so again, that kind of mindset, when you're open to that kind of mindset, you're also open to, they may be triggered or have a negative reaction to a particular thing. And we realize that's it. I mean, it's not a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. And we have ways of addressing it. We have, again, mental health first aid training for our leaders. We have, mental health services that are available for workers here. We give people can take time off if they need it. They can work remotely. Anybody who tells me that they have a non-labor related job and they can't work remote is just doing that just to be mean, I think. Because why not? We showed my bride was at home for almost 2 years and never went to her office for 2 years. So if it worked for those 2 years, it'll work for 10 more. It will. So you have written a book called Fighting Goliath. Tell me a little bit about your book.
I have, and I never thought that I would ever be an author. But God is the creator of the impossible, and He made this book happen. I know that He wanted my story to be told. So this book that I have written is a faith-based book, but it is about overcoming the biggest giant in your life. And the biggest giant in my life is living with bipolar disorder. And everybody has a giant in their life and what they're trying to overcome. So this book talks about not only my journey, my family's journey. There's a chapter on stigma. There's a chapter on faith and church stigma and how churches can build stigma-free mental health ministries within their church. It's a book about finding your purpose despite living with a serious mental illness. People who live with bipolar disorder can live very fulfilling lives. I've already mentioned that. I live a very fulfilling life. I'm married. I have children. I have an education. It's just how you learn to take care of yourself. Really, it comes down to that, is how you learn to take care of yourself and building the support, finding your people, and building that community that is going to help you through this journey. Your workplace being a huge part of that. We were talking before about anxiety too. I found with my commute too, I had the luxury of being a salary employee. So when I came to work, if I was a few minutes late, I wasn't really frowned upon much. I'm a very on time person, so I try never to be late. But, sometimes you don't know what you're going to deal with in traffic going to work. But then there's those people who are punching a clock too. And I can't even imagine the anxiety they must have to go through if they are diagnosed with a mental health condition and they run into something like that on their commute to work and their workplace is not understandable about it. They're going to get dinged, and only if they knew what that person was going through to try to get there, you know? So I am very excited about this book. It is my first book. It's called Fighting Goliath, Slaying the Giant of Bipolar Disorder, and it is scheduled to release this spring.
Absolutely. Wow. Congratulations on your author journey. Fighting Goliath. Wow. Yeah. And well, a person who's named David, my middle name, has heard stories about certainly heard stories about, fighting giants. And it's an interesting point that you make. We all have something that's big to us. It's big to us. It might be minute to somebody else, but to me, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes from my book is this. It says, "Often our greatest strength lies in the very thing that once brought us to our knees. The struggle that drains us, it robs us of our peace, and knocks on your door relentlessly."
Wow. Wow. That definition is, or at least even the conversation we're having is similar to the definition that I cover in my book regarding what a psychosocial hazard is. So it's a situation, it's a psychosocial factor that's perceived or experienced by the person exposed as threatening to them, and so threatening that it causes their behavior to change, and which means that the list is endless. It's literally endless. It could be anything. And again, when I say that, for some people, they think, "Oh boy, that's lots and lots that I have to deal with." No, not really. It simply means that when the other person, when their giant stands up for them, is the environment such that you're supportive of we how we help address it. I can't solve it for you, and I
Right.
can't do things to you that are going to be good for you. It's the only thing I can do is work through it with you, because that's what works best. We decided to be a part of this, whatever it is. We decided to be on this podcast today. I didn't ride out to your house and drag you. So we create the environment. It's not you or me. It's both of us. And everything that we do as human beings should be, at least in my view, should be that way, that we all decided to be a part of this. So how can we benefit as much as possible from whatever it is that we're doing?
Absolutely. It's making that choice, whether at work, whether in the community, whether at school, to walk along that person, walk along beside that person and meet them exactly where they are in that
Where they
time.
are. Where they are.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Where they are. Oh boy. Well, wow. I've really enjoyed hearing your story and having you share. If folks want to learn more about your book, about your ministry, about you, and what you're doing, how would they find out more about what's going on in your life?
They can check out my personal LinkedIn profile, which is Jesslyn McCutcheon, or you could probably also type in Fighting Goliath for Mental Illness. And another great way is my website, www.jesslyn, Jesslyn, McCutcheon, McCutcheon.com. And there's information about my book on there, my ministry, and my other socials if you chose to follow me there.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, this is just very, very, very helpful. Very, very, because again, we've all got a giant. We, we've all got one.
We do.
Some of us have multiple giants, but everybody has at least one, something that is bigger than them that, and the giant's not going to go away. So how are you going to live with it? How are you going to deal with it? Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So, if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something you've heard will bring you back to a future episode. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And please do join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast.
Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.